Good afternoon, Gracers, or good morning or evening, depending on when you're watching this, I suppose. This month, November, we're going to be talking about Vincent van Gogh, teaching the kids about him. So I'm going to take you through the slides just to give you an idea of what's in here. Van Gogh was born in the Netherlands in March of 1853, and he loved books and drawing when he was a kid. He was very good at drawing. But he really never thought about becoming an artist. He actually started out by being an art dealer and selling printed reproductions of other people's artwork. He was very compassionate for the poor and unfortunate, and he really decided art dealing was not for him, and he actually started training to be a minister. He studied with that for 3 years, but he actually failed his church exams. But he still went on to serve as a preacher in a mining area. And it was a very hard life. He chose to live it as the miners did. He had very little food, clothing, and it was just poor conditions overall. Most of the miners were very thin and dirty and sickly. And he was clearly drawing at this time, and his art was very much inspired by the miners and their lives. And you can take a look at this piece of art. You can talk to the kids about what emotions might be provoked from it, how you can't see the person's face, but there are still emotions that are coming from this piece of art. So you can talk to them about that if you'd like. He started to study art more seriously when he was 27. He was studying with several lead Dutch painters, and the style of these painters was very tonal. They didn't use much color. Van Gogh focused his subject matter on the somber and the hard lives of peasants, and he spent a lot of time watching them in the fields and in their lives day to day. So you could talk to the kids about why this painting is considered tonal, and how does this painting make them feel, and why do they think it gives them those feelings. So in 1885, Vincent's father died, and this was really hard on him. He moved in with his brother in Paris, and this was when there was a new movement called Impressionism that was being explored, and Impressionists believed that paintings should be quick and an expression of a moment in time. The Impressionists had a huge influence on Van Gogh's painting, and he started painting with much brighter colors, and his paintings were now of street scenes, cafes, flowers, rather than people and their difficult lives. So you can talk to the kids about how this painting was different from the tonal paintings that they just looked at, and how does this one make them feel compared to the last two paintings we saw. So at some point, Vincent became friends with Paul Gauguin and Paul Signac, and they introduced him to a method called pointillism, which is painting dots of color side by side and letting your eye do the mixing of the colors to view an overall cohesive picture. So you can talk to the kids, ask them about what are some of the interesting details that they see in this painting, and where do they find pointillism in this painting. You can see primarily the pointillism in the background, the floor here, the walls. Okay. So Van Gogh really wanted to find his own style as an artist, and he became really interested in Japanese prints. They had very strong colors, sinuous lines, and the flat surfaces ended up being a strong influence in some of his later works. And here he's starting to paint in his own style. So you can ask the kids how this one is different from the others that they've seen, because so far we've seen a few different paintings of his, and they all really do almost look like different artists, really. So Pierre Tanguy owned a small paint shop and helped out struggling artists, and Vincent painted a portrait of him in exchange for some art materials. The backdrop here is Japanese prints, and this was a compliment because Japan represented Van Gogh's ideal world. Van Gogh moved to the south of France in 1888, and with him he brought everything that he learned about in Paris, light and color, and he applied all of that knowledge to what he was seeing then in southern France in the landscapes. And he walked around for hours every day, looking for somewhere to set up his easel, and he'd paint what he was looking at. And this is called plein air painting, basically painting what you're seeing in outdoors. He started to really love painting the landscapes around him, the colorful skies, trees, seascapes, and his paintings really became very full of energy and with the quick brush strokes and a lot of bright colors. 1888 ended up being a really great year and a productive year for Van Gogh. He painted around 200 paintings, and most of his famous paintings were done the summer of 1888, including this one here called Sunflowers. But Vincent started eating too little and drinking too much, and he started to become anxious and sickly, and he worked through all of it. So he created hundreds of paintings, but he never sold any of them. He was very poor, and that, along with too much hard work, was really making him sick, and he started to worry about his own sanity. Here he painted his bedroom, and he used colors to express a totally restful feeling. And this painting shows elements of Van Gogh's own style. You can see that this has elements of some of the other paintings, but is actually still very different from many of the others that he's done. So here you can see uniform colors, broad, flat surfaces, complementary colors, and freedom from rules of perspective. So you can see that perspective looks a little bit off. It doesn't really look like a realistic bedroom. And you can talk to the kids here about whether they see anything here in Van Gogh's bedroom that might tell us a little bit about him. You can see paintings on the walls. Just tells us a little bit about Van Gogh. So in the summer of 1888, Vincent's friend Gogh moved in with him, and Van Gogh was having more trouble with illness, hallucinations, anxiety. He was just having a tough time. And on the night of December 23rd, he was really losing control of his mind. And he and Gogh had an argument, and Gogh decided to leave for the night. And Van Gogh became so upset that he cut off his own ear and was found the next morning in his bed unconscious. Now, this is interesting because there have been other reports, stories, speculations, however you want to put it, that he couldn't really have done this to himself, and that quite possibly someone else may have done it. So then it does lead you to wonder whether Gogh really left. Like I said, a lot of speculation here, but it's just sort of an interesting little tidbit. And he was taken to a hospital. He was unconscious for 3 days. He was released in January and was painting again at his house. But at this point, the neighbors were scared and really concerned about him being violent. And they wrote to the mayor, and he was readmitted to the hospital. And in May of 1889, he transferred himself from the hospital to an asylum. So his brother arranged for him to have a studio here, and he started working from what was around him there at the asylum. And he painted the gardens, the fountains, the trees. The doctors started to become sympathetic towards him, and they let him go out on painting trips and make more plein air paintings. And Van Gogh used his surroundings for inspiration here, as he always did. So he wrote to his brother Theo describing his inspiration for Starry Night, which is certainly one of his more famous paintings. And he said, "This morning I saw the countryside from my window a long time before sunrise with nothing but the morning star, which looked very big." So here, when he painted this, he was looking out from the window of the asylum. And you can talk to the kids about this painting and what they see in the painting, what kinds of brush strokes do they see, and compare it to some of his other paintings. So Vincent's doctor at the asylum was very kind to him, and Van Gogh often painted portraits of people that were kind to him. So here you can see his doctor. He was afraid his art would not be remembered, but in fact he's become one of the most famous and memorable artists of all time. And in fact, in 1990, 100 years after he died, this particular painting was sold in New York for over $82 million, which made it one of the most expensive paintings ever sold. So his sanity continued to deteriorate, and he died in 1890 when he was 37 years old. So the part that I left out here, and you can choose whether you feel you can share it with your class, is that he did in fact kill himself. The kids always ask how the artist died, so you can share that if you'd like. I don't know exactly how he killed himself, so if you honestly want to say you don't know how he died, you can certainly say that too. Van Gogh was passionate, and his vibrant paintings were never famous during his lifetime. And as we said before, he never sold any paintings when he was alive. But not long after he died, his artwork actually started to become quite famous. And as we've said before, now he's one of the most famous and influential artists of all time. Even though he was really unlucky, he believed that all things have a very vibrant spirit, and he tried to show that in his paintings by using the quick brush strokes with the swirling movement. You can see a lot of that here in this self-portrait. And like many other artists, his style changed a lot throughout his painting career. And so that's Van Gogh. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope the kids enjoy it, and check out the projects video for the projects that you'll be doing. Thanks so much, guys.